Hello everyone, my name is Bakshi Puneet and today we will discuss about cranial nerve examination. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine.
What's your name?
Kiran Bakshi.
Today we will perform cranial nerve examination.
Okay.
As we all know, there are 12 pair of cranial nerve. There are different functions which coincides with different cranial nerve. Like for smell, cranial nerve 1 which is olfactory is responsible. For visual acuity, visual field and ocular fundi, the optic nerve or cranial nerve 2nd is responsible. For pupillary reaction, cranial nerve 2 and 3 is responsible. For extraocular movement, cranial nerve 3, 4 and 6 is responsible. For corneal reflexes, facial sensations and jaw movements, the branches of cranial nerve 5 is responsible. For facial movement, the cranial nerve 7, which is called facial nerve, is responsible. For hearing, cranial nerve 8 or vestibulocochlear nerve is responsible. For swallowing and rise of the palate or gag reflex, cranial nerve 9 and 10 both is responsible. For voice and speech, cranial nerve 5, 7, 10, 12 and 9 is responsible. For shoulder and neck movement, cranial nerve 11 or spinal accessory nerve is responsible. For the tongue movement, symmetry and position, cranial nerve 12 called hypoglossal nerve is responsible. Test the sense of smell by presenting the patient with familiar non-irritating odor. First, make sure that each nasal passage is patent by compressing one side of the nose and asking the patient to sniff through the other. Then ask the patient to close both eyes, occlude one nostril, and test smell in the other with substances like cloves, coffee, soap, or vanilla. Avoid noxious odor like ammonia that might stimulate the cranial nerve 5. Ask the patient to identify each odor. Test smell on the other side. Normally, the patient perceives odor on each side and identifies them correctly. To test the acuity of central vision, use a well-lit Snellen eye chart if possible. Position the patient 20 feet from the chart. Patient who wear glasses other than for reading should put them on. Ask the patient to cover one eye with a card to prevent looking through the finger and to read the smallest line of print possible. Coaxing to attempt the next line may improve performance. A patient who cannot read the largest letter should be positioned closer to the chart. Note the intervening distance. Identify the smallest line of print where the patient can identify more than half the letters. Record the visual acuity designated at the side of the line along the use of the glasses, if any. Visual acuity is expressed as two numbers. The first indicate the distance of the patient from the chart and the second the distance at which a normal eye can read the line of letters. If you have no charts, screen visual acuity with any available print. If patient cannot read even the largest letter, test their ability to count your upraised finger and distinguish light, such as your flashlight from dark. Next, to test the visual field by confrontation, we have two tests: static finger wiggle test and kinetic red target test. First, in static finger wiggle test, position yourself about an arm's length away from the patient. Close one eye and have the patient cover the opposite eye while staring at your open eye. So, for example, when the patient covers the left eye to test the visual field of the patient's right eye, you should cover your right eye to mimic the patient's field of view. Place your hand about 2 feet apart, out of the patient's view, roughly lateral to the patient's ear. While in this position, wiggle your finger and slowly bring your moving fingers forward into the patient's center of view. Ask the patient to tell you as soon as he or she sees your finger movement. Test each clock hour or at least each quadrant. Test each eye individually. Note any abnormal field cuts. Second, we have kinetic red target test. Facing the patient, move a 5 mm red topped pin inward from beyond the boundary of each quadrant along a line bisecting the horizontal and vertical meridians. Ask the patient when the pin first appears to be red. Inspect the size and shape of the pupils and compare one side with the other. Aniscoria, or a difference of more than 0.4 mm in the diameter of one pupil compared to the other, is seen in up to 38% of healthy individuals. Test the pupillary reactions to light. Also check the near response, which tests pupillary constriction, convergence and accommodation of the lens. Test the extraocular movements in the 6 cardinal directions of gaze and look for the loss of conjugate movement in any of the 6 directions which causes the diplopia. Check the convergence of the eyes. Identify any nystagmus, which is an involuntary jerking movement of the eyes with quick and slow components. Look for ptosis, which is the drooping of the upper eyelid. A slight difference in the width of the palpebral fissure is a normal variant in approximately 1/3 of a patient. For testing the motor function of the trigeminal nerve, while palpating the temporal and masseter muscles in turn, ask the patient to firmly clench the teeth. Note the strength of the muscle contraction. Ask the patient to open and move the jaw from side to side. Now we will test the sensory function of trigeminal nerve. After explaining what we are planning to do, test the forehead, cheek and chin on each side for pain sensation. The patient's eyes should be closed. Use a suitable sharp object such as pin or a cotton swab. You can create a sharp wood splinter by breaking or twisting a cotton swab. To avoid transmitting the infection, use a new object for each patient. While testing occasionally, substitute the blunt end for the point as a contrasting stimulus. Ask the patient to report whether each stimulus is sharp or dull and to compare sites. Now we will detect the corneal reflex. Ask the patient to look up and away from you and approach from the opposite side out of the patient's line of vision. Avoiding the eyelashes, lightly touch the cornea, not just the conjunctiva, with a fine wisp of cotton. If the patient is apprehensive, touching the conjunctiva first may be helpful. Inspect for blinking of both the eyes, the normal reaction to this stimulus. The sensory limb of this reflex is carried in cranial nerve 5 and the motor response in cranial nerve 7 on both sides. Contact lenses interfere with this testing. Inspect the face both at rest and during the conversation with the patient. Note any asymmetry, often visible in the nasolabial folds, and observe any tics or other abnormal movements. Ask the patient to raise both eyebrows, frown, to close both the eyes so that we cannot open them. Test the muscular strength by trying to open them. Ask the patient to show both upper and lower teeth, to smile, to puff out both cheeks. In unilateral facial paralysis, the mouth droops on the paralyzed side while the patient smiles or grimaces. Assess hearing with a whispered voice test. Ask the patient to repeat numbers whispered into one ear while blocking or rubbing your fingers next to the contralateral ear. The whispered voice test is both sensitive and specific when assessing the presence or absence of hearing loss. If hearing loss is present, determine if the loss is conductive from impaired air through ear transmission or sensorineural from damage to the cochlear branch of the cranial nerve 8. Test for air and bone conduction using the Rene test and lateralization using the Weber test. Listen to the patient's voice. Is it hoarse or does it has a nasal quality? Is there difficulty in swallowing? Difficulty in swallowing suggests pharyngeal or palatal weakness. Ask the patient to say aha or to yawn as you watch the movement of the soft palate and the pharynx. The soft palate normally rises symmetrically, the uvula remains in the midline, and each side of the posterior pharynx moves medially like a curtain. The slightly curved uvula seen occasionally as a normal variation and should not be mistaken for a uvula deviated by a lesion of cranial nerve 9 or 10. The palatal fails to rise with a bilateral lesion of cranial nerve 10. Now we will perform gag reflex. Warn the patient that you are going to test the gag reflex, which some patient may refuse. This test consists of elevation of tongue and soft palate and constriction of the pharyngeal muscle. Stimulate the back of the throat lightly on each side in turn and observe the gag reflex. This reflex is diminished in many normal healthy people. Unilateral absence of this reflex suggests a lesion of cranial nerve 9 and perhaps 10. Stand behind the patient. Look for atrophy or fasciculation in the trapezius muscle and compare one side with the other. Fasciculations are fine flickering irregular movements in small group of muscle fiber. Ask the patient to shrug both shoulders upward against your hand. Note the strength and contraction of the trapezius. Now, ask the patient to turn his or her head to each side against your hand. Observe the contraction of the opposite sternocleidomastoid muscle and note the force of movement against your hand. Listen to the articulation of the patient's word. This depends on the cranial nerve 5, 7, 9, 10 and 12. Inspect the patient's tongue as it lies on the floor of the mouth. Look for any atrophy or fasciculations. Some coarser restless movements are normal. Then with the patient's tongue protruded, look for asymmetry, atrophy or a deviation from the midline. Ask the patient to move the tongue from side to side and note the symmetry of the movement. In a unilateral cortical lesion, the protruded tongue deviates away from the side of the cortical lesion. In cranial nerve 12 lesion, the tongue deviates to the weak side.